بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. It's a wintry day today, so let's start with something to reflect upon. You all know the story of Yusuf. This isn't to do with this topic, but let's start with this inshallah. You all know the story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. It's a very famous story, one that we learn and we teach to our children because there's so much you can learn for your own life, for your own journey in there. In a book called Al-Bahr al-Madid, it's a book on tafsir. It's a very esoteric, very tasawwuf, Sufi sort of kitab. It's a very interesting book. It's mentioned in Bahr al-Madid that Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, when he became much older later on, after all the episode and everything that happened in the Quran, he says that Sadi knows the story because I shared it with him, and I knew that he would love the story, so he's already heard the story, but you can see the excitement already on his face, mashallah. So in that story, in that qissa, Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam turns to his son. I think his name was Mahish, one of his sons. He turns to him and he says, you see those group of people there. I'm elaborating a little bit, I'm exaggerating a little bit. He says, that group of people that you see over there, those old men over there, take care of them because they're your paternal uncles. Who's the paternal uncles here of that son? The brothers of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. So he says, look after these people. Look after these people. Take care of these old people. They're old now. Look after them. So the son, mashallah, being young, he says, but aren't these the same people who sold you? Aren't these the same people that sold you? As we say, like, the guy sold me, man. Sold me out. This is what happened to Yusuf alayhi salam. They sold him out. So what does Yusuf alayhi salam say? He's a prophet, obviously, but it's a deep, deep lesson for us. And the wali of Allah understands this really, really well, and this is what they practice upon. So he says that, that why should I be, these are the people that sold you, and you had to go through, you have to endure all of that Allah mentions in the Quran. So he says, he turns around, the dad flips the story around, and the dad says to him, alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, aren't these the same people because of whom I became the king of Egypt? Aren't these the same people because of whom I became the king of Egypt? Can you see? So this is a big ibrah for us that I don't need to elaborate too much, but you get the story that when someone does something to you, don't begrudge them, don't hold it against them. And sometimes, evil people have evil plans for you or your family or whatever, right? But sometimes something good comes out of it at the end as well. You're the one that benefits because you never did wrong. Allah will deal with them, but don't repay an evil act with an evil act, because Allah will give you something better. Of course, Allah mentions about Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam, فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ, patience, beautiful patience. So not only was it for Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam, but also for his progeny as well. So this is something it's difficult because a lot of people, when you meet them, you say, "Hey, calm down, no, I want to get him back. How dare he does that to me?" Yeah. But the prophetic way is to see through the story, look at the long-term impact, because we've become accustomed to short-termism. We want everything quick. وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ عَجُولًا جَلِّي. We want everything quick. We want results to be quick. And that also comes from our educational systems, our work systems, everything else. It's like everywhere around us, and people get anxiety and so forth, because very few people are those who can think about the long-term game, the long game, right? You might lose a game here and there in football, but you want to win the title in the end, right? So, why upset your players because you lost one game, right? Look at the bigger picture as an example, right? So anyway, reflect upon that story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. 2 weeks ago, we began the journey of the Fitrah, right? And we talked about the linguistic meaning of the word Fitrah, and this is natural predisposition. We asked this question that, are people born as Muslims? What was the answer? Not quite, right? They're not born as Muslims, but they are all born inclining towards the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we as parents, or our parents, are the ones, or one of the groups of people who play a role in us finding the truth, right? Every child will be influenced by something in society, right? It's a fact of life. The dunya, you come into the dunya, you come pure, right? And I want to start from there, that you come into this dunya with a pure disposition. Are children born sinful? Are children born sinful? No. Are they born evil? No. certain Christian traditions have this. Not all Christian traditions, especially the Western Christian traditions. If you look at Protestantism, Catholicism, they have this idea that children are born with original sin. The sin of who? Adam alayhi salam. That is his fault. And so we are all tainted by the sin of Adam alayhi salam. And then they go through so much gymnastics to like kind of go through this idea, right? And they say, well, because he was born with this sin, he did this sin, we are all born sinful. And so Isa alayhi salam came and he had to redeem us. So the only way you can get Jannah is through Jesus. You hear this quite a lot, right? Some Christian traditions obviously don't believe in this. Some history for Saint Augustine is a very famous Christian. He came out with this Aqidah. This is their Aqidah, the Western Christian tradition. They believe this. Why is this important? Because this even comes into your education system. They don't teach your children this, but they have this idea, this falsafa that human beings, you can't be trusted. That's why they have to monitor you. When did you come to work? How many hours did you do? We need to keep a track of everything. If you work in medicine, you'll know about this. Whatever fields you work in, everything needs to be recorded, because human beings cannot be trusted, right? You don't have this idea of like, you're not ethical anymore. And this is because of a unique history in Europe, where they remove God, they remove ethics and morality, right and wrong. It's all about facts now. It's all about data now. You'll see this in your work life as well, in your education system. Our children are being brought up with these values, or these ideas, they're factual values. It's all about facts. No one cares about your morality. No one cares about whether something is ethical or not. Whereas in Islamic tradition, one of the things that's unique about Islamic tradition, in fact, I'm reading a book on that. If anyone's ever interested, really finish reading it, as you can tell, The Impossible State, which is that one of the beautiful things about Islam was that everything we did was through the lens of being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And that's something unique about our tradition. So he came out with this idea that, we are born with sin, right? And Isa, only through Christianity, only by becoming a Christian, that you will become pure. In Islam, we don't have that, right? Nobody died for your sins. You weren't born with sin. You weren't born evil. Nobody's born evil. They pick up those values from the culture and the family and the communities that they live in. And so they say, well, the only way of salvation is through Jesus. But you hear this. This is why they went out. And I'm going off on a tangent here because it's important for us to know. They say, Islam is a violent religion. Can't get Islam violent religion. They went out and converted millions of people forcefully because they believe. Remember, what's their Aqidah? That if you don't save these people, then they're damned. That's what they believe, and they forcibly converted millions of people. Just look at the history of, America, right, and Africa, all of these places. Right? They force people to accept their particular Aqidah, right? Because they said, if we don't convert these people, then they can't be from those who are saved as well. So this Aqidah is not something that's innocent. You remember what I mean? This innocence, it has an innocence to it, but it has, in terms of impact, it's something very, very sinister. Right? And I'm not making this up. You can read this up in history. So this isn't me attacking a religion. It's a historical fact. Right? Anybody that studies history will come to this conclusion as well. But we believe that we are born free from sin. We're not born evil. No child is born evil. Right? It's how we do tarbiyat of them. And so we don't have this sin of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. This is very, very fundamental, by the way, because a lot of people, even within Islam, when they talk, they get this mixed up. So like they say, there's a famous hadith, I don't have time to go into it, about Hawa alayhi salatu wasalam. She was born from a rib, and people use that to denigrate and make women look, belittle women. That's not the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. That's not the way of Rasul. That's abusing hadith. A lot of people do this. They use hadith to kind of say women are like this, and because the Prophet said this. Well, what did the Prophet say? What did he mean by it? How did the Sahaba understand what he said? That's a separate bayan for some other day as well. But we are born with this inclination towards truth, towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. And so many children are born into non-Muslim parents, right? But they still have that fitrah in them, that ability to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it's your nature. Just like I said last week, every animal has a certain nature about it, something about it that makes it unique. Every object, every creation of Allah has something about it. A tree grows in a certain way, does it not? Right? It can't grow upside down. It can't even grow straight, like in a right angle. it grows like crooked. That's its nature. What are you going to do? You're going to try and change that? That's the beauty of that. So one of the things that's really interesting, and I was thinking about this before, is that we're so obsessed with making everything straight that we sometimes miss what's beautiful about being crooked as well. So being crooked is not wrong in of itself. I'm just using the example of a tree, right? A tree is a magnificent creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From what it comes from, what it becomes, what it does, and then we chop it up and we use it for wood, and you can reuse it, right? You can use it for paper, for trees, and for wood, and all sorts of things, beautiful things. But it's a crooked thing, but it's beneficial, right? But Allah's created it that way. Right? If you try to change it, if you try to genetically modify a tree that grows straight, and so we don't have to chop it anymore, we only have to use, we only have to do it in a certain way, that's messing about the makhluk Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah has created it in a certain way. And so, by the way, being crooked is not bad in of itself. We have these negative terms, we call them pejorative terms in English. When you use certain words like black, the color black is seen as bad or something, or red is seen as blood or bad. There's certain languages, certain words that we use, right? It all depends on how you use them. Right? It all comes down to what you mean by it. So a tree is a good example of that, because I have trees around my house, and I'm just in awe of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they're so firm, even in the windy weather that we had over the last few days. Some branches fell, but they were strong, and they were stubborn, they were resolute, and it reminds me of believers who are strong in their faith, because those trees have been there for years and years and years, and they've really embedded themselves. It's all Muslims need to be like. You might be don't want to talk about trees in the middle of a concrete jungle, right? No, trees are they're very prophetic. The Prophet ﷺ talks about them, and there's a lot we can learn just by looking at trees. And we should nurture plants and keep nature in our homes if we can, and so forth, because we can learn a lot from them. And then they become really strong over years. So how does that take? How long does that take? Years and years of that strength that comes, right? And eventually the branches come and they become very strong, and they give fruit, and then the trees come from it as well. And makhluk benefit, the squirrel, the birds have all fled now, most of them, right? But they'll come back in spring, they'll start making their nests in the trees, high up in the trees as well. And you see them now because they've left them, so you can see their homes just like exposed to the climate. So this is makhluk Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why is this important? In one of the most famous hadiths of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you've heard this time and time again, and I won't go into all the different types of hadiths about this, but you know about Laylatul Isra wal Mi'raj. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to the heavens. He went to certain places. It's mentioned in a lot of detail, and Imam Qurtubi mentions that he went to the nursery of Ibrahim alayhi salam. What is the nursery of Ibrahim alayhi salam? This is my topic today, really, that the majority of the ulama believe that any child that dies before reaching the age of maturity, they will go to Jannah, because they're not mukallaf. Until you don't become baligh, your book hasn't opened. That's why children are very pure, mashallah. That's what ulama say, our shuyukh say, the children are very pure creatures, right? Until they don't become baligh, right, their book hasn't opened, their account hasn't started yet, right? And so the majority of the ulama say, because of this hadith, many of these hadiths that we have that describe that when the Prophet ﷺ went to the heavens, he saw this really tall man. It says in the hadith that he saw a very tall man, and it was a lush green garden, and there was a tree there. Again, the tree comes back again, and he was leaning, or he was there next to this tree, and all these children around him. And the Prophet ﷺ asked, who is this? And he said, this is your father Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam as well, and these are children. Why are these children in Jannah? Because they are the Fitrah. What is the Fitrah? It's the most purest form of being in this world. You meet people even in the dunya, mashallah, sometimes in the deserts or certain places, they've been untainted by capitalism or industrialism, all of these things that we've been tainted by, computers, and iPhones, all of these things. There's pure people just in the countryside. In fact, you sometimes meet some just across in River Valley as well, the farmers, and you can just tell they're very innocent people. They can barely, when they're speaking English, some of them, you don't even know what they're saying, because they just they can tell you that's all they do all their life. They're just there with the sheep. And I'm telling you this because I live there now. And meet them, it takes you a few conversations to work out what they're saying. And it's just even he doesn't even have a phone. One of his sheep ran into my garden once. His sheep escaped, and how can I tell him? Right, and he's munching away at my grass, my lawn. My wife's telling me quick. So we had to find our neighbour, and we had to look for the farmer, and we found her so in the fields, and he came eventually, and then I learned a lot by being with him, because he taught me how to look after sheep, and and said if you find a sheep like doing upside down, then you need to lift it up and do this because they can't get up by themselves. So you learn all these things. Alhamdulillah, I've never found a sheep upside down yet, so I have to do it. But you learn all these things, mashallah, right? But like he's just telling me all these things, like pure nature, like just living in nature. So children, when they're with Ibrahim alayhi salam, because they're in their primordial, they died in that state. And they're the most pure, because a child, when you tell a child something, they just believe it, right? As they get older, they start questioning things. Schooling is a very, very corruptive influence, by the way. I didn't say education, by the way, so no one must misquote me. I didn't say education. Schooling, modern schooling, is a form of indoctrinating a child. That is why tarbiyat of a child is so important, right? And there's books written on this, so you don't have to accuse me of attacking schools or something. But it's a falsafa, it's an outlook, and it informs the way the child sees the world as well. So we move on from that as well. So every child is born with this Hanafiya. We talk about Hanifa, this idea of inclining towards monotheism as well. And so this idea of a child being born this way, right? Fitrah is showing Allah giving them Jannah, is showing Allah's mercy towards them, Allah's forgiveness, Allah's justice towards these people, because they haven't done anything. So why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take them into account? Right? So this is also consolation for many parents in our Lamak area. I know personally who have experienced loss, and it's difficult for them. Some have had more than one in our own community. Right? And one of the things I say to them is, that child will be waiting for you in Jannah. That's your ticket to Jannah, that's your access to Jannah. Because you remain patient, that's a pure child that Allah gave you. So it's a form of mercy for you in the end as well. So Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam was surrounded by all these children, and is going to be surrounded by all these children who died on Fitrah, right? Because they weren't, even if their parents were non-Muslims, even if their parents were atheists or Christian or Jew, it doesn't matter, because they're not tainted by their parents. They were born upon the Fitrah. This is an important point I need to make, right? They're born upon the Fitrah as well. And you can also find support for this in the Quran as well, that these children will be pure. Allah says in the Quran as well, بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ, right? So they'll be asked, like, this child will say, why did you kill me for? These innocent children, yateen, who are killing this world, why did you kill me for? Right? So Allah mentions this in the Quran as well. And Allah also mentions in the Quran, Surah Al-Isra, وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. You get so many aqidah points out of this. Allah says in the Quran, we don't punish anyone until we send a prophet. Until we don't send a prophet, we don't punish people. I.e., you have to be someone who is able to understand the message that's coming to you, and to be able to understand, comprehend, make a decision. Right? Otherwise, there's no taklif. You can't be held accountable if you haven't even received the message. Right? That's why in our Sharia it's very important for us to spread authentic teachings of Islam to everybody. Right? That's very, very important to bear in as well. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a very famous hadith, and we'll come to an end after talking a little about this hadith as well, and I'll answer some questions. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam says this hadith comes in many variants and many chains of transmission. So it's very interesting when you study hadith that one hadith can have little words that are slightly different. You have to be very particular. In this word the Prophet said this, in this one said this Sahabi said this, right? Why does that happen? One reason the Prophet might have said many times, right? Or you might have said the same thing in one place, but then people hear it differently. Like, you heard something from me now, or you all going to go home and say exactly what I've said? No, you're going to go home and say, you're going to paraphrase something that I've said, or put it in your own words what you've heard. Or I might have said the thing 10 years ago, then I'll say again 5 years from now. So different people will hear it at different points as well. So the ulama have to work this out. But the Prophet says, and this is hadith in Bukhari, مَا مِن مَوْلُودٍ إِلَّا يُولَدُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ. There is no child, there is no one that is born except they are born upon the fitrah. There is no child in this world except they are born upon this fitrah as well. فَأَبْوَاهُ يُهَوِّدَانِهِ وَيُنَصِّرَانِهِ. So the Prophet says as an example that it is their parents that will make them a Christian or a Jew, right? And then he gives the example that when you have an animal when it's born, like a camel, right? That when you look at this camel, it's not damaged, it's not harmed, right? It's pure, it's clean, it's unharmed, right? Just like that. The Prophet uses this example, alayhi salatu wasalam, to bring things to them. It is only later on that you cut their legs off, or you damage the animal, or you do something to the animal. But in its natural state, it's the way it is. So every child is born with this as well. This is the same in every single human being, that we are all born with this. Every child that we have is a gift. Wallahi, it's a gift. Right? I have 3 daughters, they are an absolute gift to me. But the decisions that I make, the choices that I make for them will have a massive impact on their life. That's why everything we do with our children, every moment we spend with our children, it's so important, especially in our day and age. In our day and age, like every interaction we have with every human being, in fact, you can extend it upwards to every human being, tapping into their fitrah. So even when you have people who are non-Muslims, who don't believe in Islam, if you tap into their fitrah, basic instincts, right, you can begin to unravel the years and years they've had of corrupt learning and influences. You can peel it all away. It's quite easy to do it when you get used to it. Because we're all born in this world and we're all taught certain things, and this is how the world is. Our world right now has certain philosophies. You're not taught philosophy in school, but everything that you learn has a certain philosophy, and you can trace it all back. Where did these ideas come from, right? So this is something to bear in mind as well. A lot of parents also reach out to me, and I get this question quite a lot actually. And I'm going to say this now because we have some time. How much do we have?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay, we'll end inshallah in 10 minutes. No more than 10 minutes inshallah. A lot of people come to me, and I want to share this with you, and you can interpret it how you want, and you can disagree with me. You can disagree with me and say, "No, I don't agree with you." That's fine as well. I'm okay with that. But this is my own personal experience in life. It might change next week or 2 years from now, but this is my experience as it is. A lot of people come to me and say, "Maulana, the world's full of fitna. There's so much corruption. Wherever you go, when you log on the internet, there's just images there." On YouTube, you're looking for Sheikh Shuraim and you just find Sheikh or someone else, right? So you just like everywhere you go, it's just like, and it's in your face, billboards, phones, like there isn't a place you can't go, like it's just fitna everywhere, right? And, constantly we're being attacked, our children are being attacked and so forth as well. And one of the things that I believe that it is true that to a certain extent there are these challenges out there. But I also believe theologically, from a metaphysical perspective, Allah has already told us that we're going to be tested. So every nation, every group, every generation will have their own test. We like to romanticize and think Muslims before has had it easy. Even if you lived in Islamic state or Islamic government, you had it easy, and it was all probably true to a certain extent. But every tribe, every nation, every community, every society has their own set of unique challenges. Some are global, that we would share with people in Australia, for example. But some are local, that we share here in our own communities. Some communities will have particular problems around drugs and so forth. Some people have particular problems around, they won't have drug issues, but because everybody's wealthy and well educated, they're all becoming atheists because they're not being trained in the deen properly. This is another problem, because they're not trained in the deen properly. They educate themselves, but they haven't learned the sharia. They haven't learned what the fitrah is. They haven't learned the basic aqidah. I meet a lot of people like this at university, for example, very educated Muslims, but you can tell that they're just struggling when it comes to faith because they haven't been. Their parents have just drummed into them education, but they haven't given them an all-round holistic understanding of the world. So this is true, but I also have a principle, and I've learned this from a sheikh as well, and I was watching that, sometimes we make a mountain out of a molehill. Do you know what molehill is, right? You probably don't have them here. Where I live, we have moles. So, and you can get people that come and actually take them away for you and catch them. So making a mountain out of a molehill. Sometimes like the issue is there, but we so exaggerate it that that's all we ever talk about. Right? It just becomes a big issue. And I see a lot of Muslims doing this as well. And it can create despair. It can create hopelessness. Right? I'm a believer in optimism as well. Realistic optimism. Not like, oh, it's so lovely, we should all love each other and hug and no, not like that. What I mean is like, there's actually good things that can happen. Right? So what we need to do is reverse it. We need to reverse it and make these mountains, these challenges into molehills. Reverse it, turn it around. Like the example of Yusuf alayhi salam I gave at the beginning, right? As an example. Now what we need to do is see these challenges and say, you know what? I'm going to be like the Sahaba who are ready to take up these challenges. Right? I'm going to read up if I need to on this subject. I'm going to learn about this subject, or I'm going to do something rather than stand on a corner of the street and spend 2 hours just talking about how problematic it is. I'm going to make a difference. Because Allah is only going to ask you about what you did. What can you do? Right? So this is very, very important that these problems that we have, these challenges that we have, none of them, I believe, are insoluble. Every problem, there's a way around it. Right? And the Sahaba, if you look at their general attitude, you will see, this is why they were successful in my eyes, that whenever they had a challenge, and even if you look at the battles as well, like they came across like advanced ways of warfare from the enemies, but they became better at it, right? When the Vikings came to Spain, South Spain, and they plundered a lot of Muslim lands and cities and stuff, right? There's a whole history behind it. What did the Muslims do? They took their women away as well. They took the Muslim women and children away. What did Muslims do? They investigated how the Vikings were, and they developed a better system. Because the Vikings had ships that were really fast, but they also had barges which were really slow, right? And so the Muslims like, okay, let's go to them and learn from them and build better boats, right? Let's not just complain and say, oh, these guys are just attacking us. So what we need to do is come up with better systems, better ways. Let me give you an example that my Ustad gave. You know, this COVID injections, and the first question we always ask is, and this is just a reality, that, you know, is it halal or something? What we need to, this situation we need to be as Muslims, inshallah, is that we don't even need to ask the question of halal, because we are the ones that are developing the vaccines. We should be at this stage, because we were like that. When we built hospitals, we did it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bimaristan, all over the Muslim lands, you'd find these hospitals. People just did it as a charitable thing. Right? I shared an article today. It was published a few months ago about how, like, even the poor countries can't get vaccines because the rich countries are not giving them the patent. Right? So it's about money, it's about saving lives. If you want to save lives, you give it to them, say, buddy, take the patent, knock yourself out, cure everyone. What do they do? No, we're not going to give it to you, because they look at the bottom line. But Muslims have never been there. So this is a travesty of the modern world. It's all about us and building our economy. So as Muslims, we need to be at that level. And so we need to become confident. We need to learn things that nothing really frightens us, to bring it on. And that's a very difficult mindset to change, because over the last few hundred years, we've been colonized so much. This is a whole bayan I can do for hours. We've been colonized so much in our minds that every time we have a problem, we just give up. We just whinge and complain. Whereas what we need to be like is like the Sahaba and the Tabi'een and the Tabi Tabi'een and the great scholars. I don't use the word golden age, it's nostalgic. But this idea that, you know, whatever challenges is coming before us as Muslims, we're going to find a solution around it. We're going to get better at this as well. And so, you know, this is something that we need to be aware of as well. And there was another question someone asked me, but I'm not going to answer it today, maybe next 2 weeks' time, which is a big question. It's a very intelligent question, which is, Maulana, you talk about a fitrah. And I'll just leave this question, but we'll deal with it next time, inshallah, if you remind me. You know, we talk about a fitrah, but this is something that it's not scientific. Well, how can it be scientific? We never studied. How can you measure this? How can you conduct experiments on fitrah? It's something that's, that question is a very good question, but it comes from something deeper. Because every one of us, illa mashallah, have adopted a scientific worldview. Our children adopted it as well. And so because we've adopted that worldview, we come up with these questions. I don't believe it's a stupid question to ask, but I think that question is very easy to answer. And so this question was asked that, you know, ruh, where's the ruh? Where's the soul? Nobody. First, you need to answer what is science about. Then, before you answer that question, you need to say to the person, brother, sister, we need to sit down. We need to understand what is science, what are the remits of science, what are the boundaries of science, and when does science go into another area which it shouldn't be going into, right? And once you understand these boundaries, then you'll be like, okay, yeah, if we're living in a scientific worldview, then yeah, that question we can't answer it, because science can't answer that question. But there is another science that can explore that question, that can answer that question. So you need to understand that we need to situate things in the right place. We'll stop there, inshallah. Next time we'll go into a bit more detail about the fitrah. I hope that these lessons and these reflections will help you and the people that are watching at home afterwards in becoming stronger believers, and knowing that as Muslims we have strong foundations, we have strong principles, and we have nothing to be afraid of, right? And we should pass this message on. We should share these messages with our people to show that our Islam is a very strong, intellectually robust tradition, right? It's very deep, deeper than anything else you'll ever come across, to my knowledge. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first and foremost, we need to give us all the tawfiq, subhanahu wa ta'ala, subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Jazakallah.